Welcome to this session, and today we'll be having a look at the do while loop. Right, in our previous video, we looked at the while loop, how the structure is, and how we can use the while loop. And today we are going to work on the do while loop. So, first things first, we have to know that the do while loop is a post test loop. While we have our while loop being a pre-test loop, which means it checks for an expression before it executes the statement. So if the expression is true, then we can execute the statement of the while body. And if it is false, we do not execute the statement. But then inside the do while loop, we have to execute a statement for the first time before we check the condition. So this makes a do while loop a post-test loop. All right, we execute the statement before we check for an expression or a condition. Right. So let's dive into it and see the flowchart for the do while loop. So this will definitely be our start. Then we have some statements, and after we execute our statement, we check for a condition. And if the condition is true, we can execute the loop again and check for the expression again if it's true until it is false. Then we can break out of our do while loop and go to the next code of execution. Right. So even if our condition is false for the first time, we are still going to execute the statement for a do while loop before we actually check for the expression. Right. So this will be a very basic structure or format for the do while loop. You have your do, and remember from our previous lesson on while loop, if you have only one statement inside your loop, you can choose to omit the curly braces. So this will just be a statement. You can just do one and then choose not to bring the curly braces. Then you have your while expression. Make sure to end with a semicolon. All right, so in general, we can have do, then your curly braces, which will contain the body of your while loop. Right, so you can have a lot of statements in here, lines of code. And then after, you can execute or check for the expression. If it is true, we can run the code again until this expression is false. Then we can break out of this loop. Right, so let's go into our IDE and we are going to do a couple of things. So in our previous lesson, we looked at printing numbers from 1 to 20 using the while loop. So then again, we are going to try and do the same thing using the do while loop, right? And later on, we can check what actually makes this do while loop better in some cases than the while loop. All right, so let's dive into it. We are going to use the do while loop. Right, so then again, we say our do is, there is a structure for our do while, right, basically, and some expression, make sure to end with a semicolon. Right. So while this, we can create a variable to start our number from 1, right? So let's do int num equals 1. Num equals 1. Right, so this should be it. And inside our body, we can execute the numbers from 1 to 20 as far as the number doesn't go beyond 20, right? So in here, we can just output the number, cout num. We can do a space space, right? That is it. So then again, we come back to what we call the counters. So counters actually help us to break out of a loop, right? So we are going to increment this non-variable using our increment operator, right? So we can do num plus plus, and each time we execute this statement, this is going to be increased by 1. Then we can check. What we actually want to check is print numbers from 1 to 20. So we don't have to go beyond 20. And we can do that by saying num is less than 21. All right. Or you can also choose to go with, let's make this a comment. You can also choose to go with while num is less than or equal to 20. This also works, right? Okay, so this is basically our code to print numbers from 1 to 20, right? And then after we are out of the code, we can output a message to the user that we are out of the do while loop, right? So let's say we are out of the do while loop. You can end this. So let's run this, and basically we are supposed to see 1 to 20, right? So we print numbers from 1 through to 20, and we go outside of the loop, right? So the first thing, our variable is set to 1, right? So when we come to the while loop, the first thing it is going to do is print it. It is going to print the value inside this variable, which the first one is going to be 1. And then it will increment it. So this is going to be 2. So when it gets here, it is actually checking, is 2 less than 21, which is yes or true. So we run the do statement again. So we run again. We get to 20 and we check, is 20 less than this? Yes, that will be also printed. All right, so then we get to 21. Is 21 less than 21? No, 21 is equal to 21. So that becomes false, and then we break out of the do while loop. And then we can come out of the do while loop. This is outside the do while loop, and print this separator line, and then we say we are out of the do while loop, right? So this is basically how the do while loop works, right? You can write very good programs with this. So then again, we can also try using the even numbers analogy. So using the do while loop, let's print even numbers. Then again, we are going to make use of our if condition, right? And then how do you know if a number is an even number? If you divide a number by 2, your remainder should always be 0, right? And how do you find the remainder of something in programming? Mostly we use the modulus operator, which is a percentage sign, right? So let's take this away, and then we can do if our num modulus 2 is equal to 0, right? We spoke about equal to in our previous video, where if you want to check if the right hand side is equal to the left hand side, if you use just 1, this is like assigning a value to a variable. So this will be like you want to assign 0 to this, which doesn't work for our if conditions, right? So you want to make this 2 to check for both sides being equal, right? So if our remainder is equal to 0, then we can print out the value, the number, right, which is surely going to be an even number. Then we can output this, right? So we are only having one line of code for the if statement. So you can choose to omit the curly braces, right? Where you can start from here and then you can end here, right? You can do this, but I'm going to take it away because we have just one line of code under the if statement. So this should give us only even numbers between 1 and 20, right? So this is actually out of the if condition. So let's run this and see what we get. So we get 2, 4, 6, 8 through to 20, all being even numbers. And then, yeah, we can print what is outside the while loop so that we are outside the do while loop. So basically, this is what you will need to understand on the do while loop. Then later on, we can try our hands on some questions that will help us better understand this well, right? So we'll try modifying this code to print out odd numbers, or basically numbers that are not even numbers, right? You just have to change one thing in here, right? So if you want to do that, let's do this. You can do, wow, if our number modulus 2 is not equal to 0, right? This is not equal to in programming. Then we can output the number, and then this time around we expect to have only odd numbers, right? So let's output this and see what we are going to get. So we get 135 just as we expect. All right. So this will be the end of this session. In our next video, we are going to solve an example where the do while loop is going to be better used rather than using the while loop, right?